Welcome back, everybody. A lot of issues on the front burner in the Senate right now. Everything from assault weapons ban to a minimum wage increase to if the government's going to shut down yet again. And joining us now to sound off is New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Senator, welcome. Let's talk about the minimum wage. I know you want to get it up to $10 in a little, and I know there's some resistance in the Senate. You make a compelling argument that a lot of folks here, they work full-time, they can't even get above the poverty line. Yet we hear small business folks saying if you raise it to that level, it'll put them out of business. How do you respond to that part of the business community?
Well, if you talk to most small businesses in our state, they'll say their biggest challenge isn't the wage they're paying their employee, it's the lack of demand. And what you're doing by raising the minimum wage is increasing demand, increasing economic activity, increasing economic confidence. For every one of those low-wage earners, you're going to pay them more money, which means they're going to put more money into the economy, buying food, buying clothing, buying necessities, and creating economic growth. So I would challenge those businesses. And actually, the average minimum wage earner works at a big business. 2/3 of minimum wage earners work at employers that have over 100 employees. So I would argue that if you can pay a hard worker a decent wage, you're going to have greater productivity and you're going to have a stronger economy because of it.
On the gun bill that's coming out now that the Democrats are going to push, an assault weapons ban will not be included. I know Senator Feinstein wanted it in there. Senator Reid said it won't be in the final version. Maybe it'll be voted on separately. I guess you'll tell us. But if it was up to you, would it be included in this omnibus bill?
Well, it's certainly a bill I support. I think that, it doesn't make common sense that the public should be able to buy a military-style weapon that's designed only to kill large numbers of people very quickly. And so it's a shame there was no bipartisan support for the assault weapons ban. But the good news is there is bipartisan support for a number of measures that I think will save lives and make a difference. One piece that's going to move forward is the part I wrote, which is to create a federal crime against trafficking and straw purchasing. In New York State, 9 out of 10 of the weapons used in crimes are trafficked illegal weapons. And so if you can give law enforcement the tools they need to crack down on those weapons, you're going to prevent a lot of gun crime and save a lot of lives. I think we also have strong movement on a background check piece as well as a mental health piece. So if you can have some reforms go forward that really will save lives, give law enforcement more tools, it's going to make a difference, even if it doesn't include an assault weapons ban, which at the end of the day, hopefully you can build the support toward. Even if we could have some measure of success, we can build on that success and continue to fight for more reform.
A question for you about Wall Street. You heard the testimony when J.P. Morgan took a grilling there at the Senate, and if they were the gold standard, as many people said, that, hey, listen, they're going to do it the right way, they've changed the leveraging, they've kept the right amount of reserves, and now we find out that it seemingly very little has changed culturally between '08 and today.
I didn't watch the hearing, but from what I've read in the paper and what I've heard, this is something that continues to need review. I mean, there needs to be transparency and accountability. We need to know that our financial institutions are strong. We want to make sure that New York remains the center of the world financial community, but it won't be able to do that if the reforms that we put in place don't work. So what I'm concerned about is making sure we have transparency, we have accountability, that we have the kind of reforms that make sure there is no such thing as too big to fail or too big to regulate or too big to reform. And that's what I'm focused on, to make sure we put the right reforms in place.
Senator, as you know, stop and frisk is on trial as we speak right now in New York, and I know the mayor and the police commissioner think that it's a necessary tool, but after the 5 millionth person that's been stopped, by every poll, the plurality of New Yorkers think its time has come and gone. What do you think about the practice, and do you think that stop and frisk, it shouldn't be part of policing in New York?
There's no room for racial profiling of any kind, and we have to make sure that we are training our police officers to respect others and to not engage in that kind of behavior. But I do listen to Commissioner Kelly when he tells me that being able to have some measure of review allows him to keep our community safer. I will listen to those views. So I think this is something that has to be debated by New Yorkers, and weigh the two countervailing issues. But I do not think you have to accept any kind of racial profiling in order to have a safe community.
Last question, Senator. As you know, this week it's the 10th anniversary of the war in Iraq. A poll came out, the majority of Americans say that in retrospect, it was not worth it. You're closer than most of us to not only all the intelligence, but you hear all of the testimony from people on the ground and have been there yourself. When asked the same question, how do you answer? Was Iraq worth it 10 years later?
I think President Bush made the wrong decision. I think that our brave men and women gave everything and sacrificed their lives, as they do in our military, because they want to protect our freedoms, because they love this country, and they are the bravest, strongest military in the world. But I do think that the Bush administration misled the American people, and I do not think there needed to be a call to war.
All right, finally, we're going to get a continuing resolution here, or is the government going to shut down, or are we going to have more silliness? Tell us some good news here, hopefully.
I am very hopeful there will be a continuing resolution and nothing will be shut down. We can continue to try harder to do the work of the American people.
Good enough, Senator. I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you very much. All right, a lot to get to. Andrew, I'll start with that last one.
I'm very hopeful, too.
Hopeful or realistic? First of all, they got to get done this week. Nobody realizes that,
They do,
right?
because the deadline is actually next week, but both houses are in recess next week, so they have to get it done this week. I think they're pretty close. They have similar bills that have moved through both houses. There's only
You were the guy who said they were going to get the sequester done, though, before they hit the deadline, weren't
No,
you?
that was Scott.
That was
Yeah, that was good, yeah.
fair enough.
So I think there's a good chance of us avoiding government shutdown.
There's a little bit of a inter-party food fight, Scott, as it relates to the assault weapons ban, because Feinstein said, I want it at least in the bill, and Reid said, sorry, ain't happening. Is that because he can count votes, or because he and other Democrats really don't need this if they're in one of these pink-shaded states here that could go either way, like a Nevada, for example? Why isn't this not in the final gun bill?
And they can't get it done. I mean, if they could get it done, they'd get it done.
So you think there would have been Democratic defections if assault weapons ban was in there?
I think that Harry Reid can count votes. And if they could deliver a victory, they would.
I'm not sure why you can't get individual votes on each of the individual items, why this has to be grouped and packaged as one big guns bill, why you can't vote on extended ammo clips and assault weapons separately and background checks separately.
Why would you want to expose your fellow Democrats?
Yeah.
Why would you want to put them out
They
there
don't want to
like
put
that?
them in a bad
Well,
position.
but go ahead.
Oh no, I was to say it's interesting, Senator Gillibrand talking about that, who once proudly claimed that she kept
Gun
a
under her
rifle
bed,
under
yep.
her bed. So, but it's never going anywhere in the House. They can't even get it through in the Democrat-controlled Senate, so they're not going to waste their time putting it on the floor for a vote.
Yeah, when it comes to gun control, Senator Gillibrand, no offense, she's the Republicans love to point to her because just a few years ago she had the total opposite position.
Evolving position, I think she called it.
That's a
Dominic.
good
All right,
term.
let's talk about minimum wage here, because she's pushing hard for $10. And whatever you think of Senator Gillibrand, she always tests the waters before she's going to float something out there. This puts Republicans in a tough spot because currently, how do you make the argument that the minimum wage national number, right, makes sense when it's actually under the poverty line? $10 sounds like a lot of money, and maybe to some businesses it is, but as she said, the majority of people making minimum wage work for large corporations right now. It's going to be tough, I would think, for Republicans to come out against this, no?
Well, I do think it's better to set the policy federally than it is to go state by state, because then you're putting your state at a disadvantage to have a higher rate and the jobs are going to end up leaving the state. So while we're having that debate here in New York, it is something that we should be looking at federally, but I don't think we should be talking about anything right now that's going to be killing more jobs in small businesses than without coming in with
I was
some
counting
other
down.
tax
I was
cuts.
counting down.
Oh, go ahead.
There you go.
You know the answer, right?
Well, I knew it was job cutting will force employers to lay people
what
off.
jobs are we creating? By Richard's own definition, we're creating jobs that keep people at the poverty level. That's not a job, that's indentured servitude.
Yeah, but a lot of
so
the
the fact
people that
is,
have
how do
minimum-
you not structure a wage system in our country which, as a minimum wage, keeps people above the poverty level? That seems like a pretty fair and just system to me.
And they
How do
should
you
put
run a
more money in the
corporation?
pocket of
Well,
people.
How do
let's
you run
talk
a
about
corporation?
repealing
How do you run a
Obamacare
how do you
and
run a
lowering
corporation? How do you
taxes
run a
on small
corporation
businesses.
where you're paying employees and your business model is based on them collecting food stamps?
Well, under President Obama, 20 million more people are on food stamps. But I think you do have to look at it as a comprehensive policy and how it does affect small businesses. and then go from there. And I think everyone agrees that, you know, $8 an hour you cannot live on, but a lot of those people making minimum wage are also college students or kids in high school, so maybe there's a way to structure it
The only
differently
thing I did
that
learn
doesn't
from this
hurt
is,
small
instead of the
businesses.
normal debate that we always go in circles, is there was a panel of economists across the board, nonpartisan, that said, if you're making 15 grand a year, 16 grand a year, you get money. It's not like you're going to stick it under the mattress. You got to spend it. And the point is, if there's one population that you put more money in their pocket that would go back into the economy, either creating ancillary jobs or at least creating more economic activity, it's this population. So for the economics argument, the more, if this population that you get to have them to have disposable money, the more it will be spent, and it won't be basically just put in an IRA or something.
There's also a lot of evidence that it doesn't actually inhibit job creation, that employers still hire minimum wage workers if you raise the minimum wage. But it's a very easy to
They hire
digest
less
argument
of them.
that's...
All right.
They hire less of them.
that's
Yeah. When we
not
come
always
back,
the case.
Jessica's favorite thing to talk about in the whole wide world, CPAC. Yes. Now, we're going to dissect here GOP because, hey, they've said it themselves. They're a party at the crossroads. They got some choices to make here. Which direction do they go? Or as one Republican says, could they actually split in two? We'll get into that after this.